Our next is approval of minutes. I'm having just a little bit of trouble logging in. Can I just look at your phone?
Yep.
Just approval of minutes from. Okay, from the June 13th, 2023 meeting. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Mr. King,
Seconded.
seconded with Mr. Bester. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Not seeing any, the motion carries. Our next item is general functions and it's staff, student, and community recognitions. Mr. Kruth.
Thank you, President Pratt and members of the board. It's for us, this is the apex of summer, and we'll be off and running next week, believe it or not, with new teacher induction. So we don't have many recognitions, especially from staff, as people are out and about enjoying the last minute of summer. We do have a few district-wide recognitions I'd like to share with you this evening. First is Desert Willow Preschool, under the direction of Lori Gum, received their quality first rating. Their first one is a 5-star rating. It's the highest rating available. It's just another tremendous honor for our community programs group. Sonita Valley Community Program School Age Program, also under the direction of Trish Romero, has become our first school age program to become accredited for out of school time programs through Arizona Center for After School Excellence, AZ CASE. Also, even though it's summer, we've had a number of students competing in different programs throughout the summer. One of those, I think I spoke about this at our last meeting, the Empire Theater Group was participating in the International Thespian Festival in Bloomington, Indiana. And there were a number of students who received recognition at that event, including Rihanna Bejarano for her solo musical. She received an excellent rating. Gianna Gibbons for solo musical, excellent. Maddie Jacobo, scenic design, excellent. Sophia Bartholomew Gonzalez, costume design, superior. Lynn Clark, solo musical, superior. Brooke Lee for lighting design, superior. And Jenks Zavala, solo musical, superior. And Jenks Zavala not only did that, but she capped off the week and brought home the national championship for her solo musical. She won the championship with her performance of I'm Breaking Down from the musical Falsettos. So congratulations to all of them and to Mr. Gremmel, their wonderful theater teacher who helped make all of that possible. That's all we have for staff, student, and community recognitions this evening.
Thank you. Our next item is call to the public and acknowledgement of public requests to speak. At this time, I don't have any requests. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak to the board tonight? Not seeing any, we'll move on to our correspondence and reports. Our first item is superintendent's report. Mr. Kruth.
Thank you, President Pratt, members of the board. As I mentioned, next week we start back. We hit the gas. On Monday, we'll have a room full of new teachers across the hallway in the blue room. Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So, and then the following week, we'll do the same with our high school teachers. So just wanted to let you all know that. And as always, the invitation is open to please stop by and say hello.
Thank you. Next is our board reports. Do any board members have a report this evening? Mr. King?
Is actually in the process of trying to write it.
Oh.
So this is all off the cuff. So, all right. So we did attend the district tour that for the design of new school that we're working on. So going out and seeing, some of the good and the bad, and seeing some of the evolution of school design, as well as talking to some of the staff out there and seeing, and hearing from them, finding out what they like, what they don't like, what they want to see kind of incorporated in the new design and everything else. And I believe the next meeting is tomorrow night at 5:30. Not tomorrow night.
No.
I can't remember which. I did see the email from Kevin. I just can't remember which. Oh, I know it was a Wednesday night though.
Yep, in July.
Okay. I also had I was interviewed by 2 different teachers in the educational leadership cohort. I'm gonna probably torture this name, but Jamie Tornatore and Gordon Quick. both of them some really, really cool people, just very interesting. Jamie being a special education teacher and doing home visits on a part-time basis, and then Gordon coming in not as a necessarily a year one teacher, but somebody who actually traveled the world to teach English in both Taiwan and China, and then came back here and became part of the district. And that was after living out his dream job of working for the Boston Celtics right out of college. So that was some of the really cool people I got to meet over the last couple of weeks. In addition to, I went to a legislative update today, put on up on the northwest side of town, and got to hear some really good information about education, some of the interesting things that are coming down the pipe, and that was pretty much it.
Great, thank you, Mr. King. Any other board reports? Thank you. We will move on to the consent agenda. All items listed below are consent matters and will be considered by one motion at this time. There'll be no discussion of consent items. Any board member may remove an item from the consent agenda by request. All items not accepted and approved as part of the consent agenda will be considered individually. Do any board members wish to pull an item? Not seeing any. Mr. Green?
Thank you, President Pratt. Members of the board, it's recommended that the Vail School District Governing Board approve all items on the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you. Do I have a motion?
You have a motion to approve as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Buster and Mrs. Tippett. I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Not seeing any. The motion carries. We'll move on to old business. Our first item is community programs performance rating system. It's an action item. Mr. Cruz?
Thank you, President Pratt and members of the board. This is an item that was studied at the last board meeting after much consideration and work with staff. Community programs has making some adjustments to their rating system for their staff, for their evaluations. That document is attached and needs to be board approved as part of that process. The idea is that to align this tool to more effectively assist leaders within the department to set those expectations with the staff that they're supervising on, so there's some transparency back and forth. So happy to answer additional questions if you have any, but I'll make the recommendation of the Vail School District Governing Board approve community programs performance rating system as presented.
Thank you. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve as presented.
Mr. Buster?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. King. Any comments or questions? No comments?
Actually good to see the work that got put in to create that evaluation tool.
I agree. Thank you, Mr. King. I was thinking the same thing. I think that it's such a great resource. It honors the employees to be able to let them know transparently, like you were saying, just to let them know feedback for their job and to help them be successful. So I'm glad that for all the time and effort that was put into that. If there's no other comments or questions.
Just very, very comprehensive.
Yes, thank you. I agree. With that, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Not seeing any, the motion carries. Thank you. We'll move on to item B, high school literature set, a revised list. Mr. Ruth, it's an action item.
Thank you, Mrs. Penn.
President Pratt, Mr. Cruz, members of the board. At our last board meeting, it was brought to our attention that one of the books that was brought forward entitled "We Have Always Lived in the Castle" had not been yet made available to the board to review. That book has been reordered. It is not yet delivered. We're expecting that perhaps it will be here tomorrow. So with that, I would like to remove "We Have Always Lived in the Castle" from the list being brought forward today, in order to give the board time to review that book before making a decision. These books have been brought through the full process that we have been going through since 2008. They were presented at our last board meeting, and they're here this evening as an action item. So I would like to make the recommendation that the Vail School District Governing Board approve the high school literature set with the exclusion of We Have Always Lived in the Castle as presented.
Thank you. Do I have a motion?
You have a motion to approve as presented?
Mr. Bester and Mrs. Tippett, seconds. Comments or questions? Mr. King?
So, Ms. Penn, you and I talked about this after the last board meeting. There were a couple books that I actually had concerns about, and that was We Were Liars and Little Fires Everywhere. And the concern was that they had, they discussed minors engaged in sexual activity. So I didn't know if that was, with that, it kind of, to me, doesn't make sense to actually put those forward.
Mr. Recruit?
President Pratt, members of the board, I'll let Mrs. Penn dive into this a little bit deeper. The process that the books went through as far as the review process with the staff and then the site councils, and the gathering of the information from the site councils, and with the requirement, our requirement now that all books have a more detailed explanation of what that looks like in the syllabus, as well as the requirement that all parents opt into those is the reason that we're bringing these forward at this time. And if there's anything else you want to add to that, Mrs. Penn.
President Pratt, Mr. Cruz, members of the board, I really don't have anything else to add to that. Because this was an item that was brought to the board, I didn't make any alterations to that, and just brought it back to the board for decision.
The one other thing is, and I know that, can you speak a little bit to the literary value component that the group, that the process requires us to consider?
Yes, President Pratt, Mr. Cruz, members of the board, the requirement is that the books that we provide to our students, if there is sexual content, whether it is of a minor or not, requires that there be literary value. There was not a definition of what literary value was. So part of the work of the committee was to define literary value. That definition was brought to the board, but it was also, it came from two kind of founding documents. One is provided from the National School Council, and the other is from the standards that are, it's the opening part of the standards of the English standards of the state of Arizona. So that's kind of the foundation of that literary value. One of the, I guess, other comments that I might just raise for this particular conversation is there are classic works of literature that also have sexual content related to minors. One that comes to mind specifically is Romeo and Juliet. And although that's not one that we have approved at the middle school level, it is something that we have approved at the high school level.
Any other comments or questions? Ms. Tippett?
I think that was where my thoughts were aligned on the literary value. Would you be able to talk about what were noted by the review committee, what those aspects of literary value were?
Thank you, Mr. Cruz.
Mrs. Penn?
I might have to shuffle through a couple of pages, and hopefully I have that document with me in print. Otherwise, I would have to look at my electronic forms.
We have time.
The literary significance, this is specifically for the book, We Were Liars. It says Lockhart rewrites and comments upon several works of classic literature, making We Were Liars highly intertextual. We Were Liars, Shakespeare's King Lear is the story of an impaired monarch bent on choosing. So I could read this, I could pass it around, but what it is saying specifically about the literary value of Little Fires Everywhere, or no, excuse me, We Were Liars, is that it references multiple other works of literature in ways that it interweaves them into this particular work, and it allows the teachers to not only work through the elements of We Were Liars, but it allows them to have cross conversations with Shakespeare's King Lear, Emily Bonnet's Wuthering Heights, Andrew Lang's fairy tale collection, and King Lear tale Capo Rushes, which I would have to probably look up a little bit more to be able to speak to that one, but you get it goes, actually the list goes on. It also references Sleeping Beauty and Beauty and the Beast. There's multiple levels of meaning and textual ambiguity. The narrator is unreliable in is cadence lying, is cadence hallucinating, We Are Liars justifies in any way doing what they did, was the crime successful in any way. It also addresses figurative language. There's so much imagery, ironic, ambiguousness, and purposefully misleading language. It talks about important themes related to prejudice and class, individuality and identity, familiar relationships, and problems with addiction. So that's the reference. Those are the references to the, and the other text. Little Fires Everywhere. The significance, Little Fires Everywhere explores the weight of secrets, the nature of art and identity, and the ferocious pull of motherhood, and the danger of believing that following the rules can avert disaster. The author writing incorporates symbolism, thematic arches, as well as multiple timelines to ask readers to delve into deeply relevant ideas from the 1980s and today.
Thank you.
One other, I think another piece I could add is we have been, as you well know, we've been in the process of having two committees really run this past year. One is to look at a committee to look at text and that we have previously approved, the board has previously approved, to make sure that it meets the standards of the laws that were passed last year, and frankly, just kind of the standards that we want to begin to uphold. So part of that outcome was some of the changes that I already referenced regarding opt-in on all books, not just some that meet the definition, and also requiring these a longer explanation in the syllabus. So the list has already been pared down quite a bit, but one of the other pieces we can continue to do is, now that all books are opt-in, we'll have a much better sense of where people are, where parents are in regards to this, is when we begin using these books. Is this something that comes up regularly, or is it something that is not an issue? And I think that can also help inform us on where we are in regard to providing text for children, for in this case, high school students to use. And again, I just want to clarify this is for use as a class-wide assignment in high school courses. So.
Go ahead, please, Mr. Russell.
If I could, Mr. Cruz, in regards to again, as Ms. Penn iterated in regards to the literacy, or excuse me, the literal value and significance, is there this particular documentation will go with the opt-in to parents? Will they be able to review it in advance, as well as educators that may or may not utilize this particular reference.
Thank you, Mr. Cruz.
I'm gonna have Mrs. Penn answer that. Mrs. Penn.
President Pratt, Mr. Cruz, members of the board. Yes, what I was reading from is language directly off of what is going to be provided to parents. It is only a portion. There is also a summary of the text, the standards that the teacher is instructing with the text, and then the significance, which is the piece that I was sharing. Teachers have been instructed to provide that to parents ahead of time. They have also been instructed that, and the practice is that they do not teach any selection to any students without getting that parent permission slip back.
What about, Mrs. Penn, can you speak to the notion of how much time a parent will have to review this? Because I know it's going to vary a little bit. I mean, the first book up is going to be less time to review, but what's that general process look like?
President Pratt, Mr. Cruz, members of the board, the general process looks like one of our goals has been to have all of the books on the syllabus at the beginning of the year. That is what we're working towards. What it looks like in practice currently at most sites is that a syllabus goes home twice a year, once for semester 1 and once for semester 2. The books are listed on what will be taught that semester. And then parents have, I couldn't say exactly how much time. I would imagine they have a couple of weeks at least to review. If they don't have enough time, that can be extended as well.
Thank you. Mr. Buster.
On the opt-out for a parent, will they have the opportunity to provide us feedback as to if they opt out, why?
Great question, Mr. Cruz.
Mrs. Penn?
President Pratt, Mr. Cruz, members of the board, that is not something that I think is currently on our forms, but it may be something that we want to gather. We have talked about creating a bit more of a robust interaction, even electronically, where parents can give feedback. So it's something we've been talking about, but we don't have that piece in place yet.
Great question.
And looking forward, as far as a total opt-in or looking at the totality of other literature coming forward, does the process change in any way in the upcoming years at this point in time?
Mr. Cruz.
President Pratt and Mr. Buster, I'll give a more general answer and then Mrs. Penn can give more specifics if I miss something or doesn't quite cover it. So as I mentioned, we have two processes. Prior to last year, we just had one. We had the high school literature review process. Goes to a teacher needs to bring forth work to their team. Then it goes to their principal. Then it comes to a committee of teachers and staff to read. The readers are assigned. And then if it passes that group, then it goes to site councils for review and then to the board. That has been the practice that's been in place for well over 10 years, 15 years. So there's a large number of books that have been approved. Last year about this time, through that process, last year at this time when the new legislation was coming down, we put an administrative hold on all previous books that had been approved because we needed time to review. Do they meet the merit of the new law and what that looks like? So the second committee was created to do that. As a part of that process, current teachers were asked to bring forth works that they wanted to use in first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, and fourth quarter, and they did that. And those were reviewed, and those have been brought to the board for review here as well. That's correct, right? We've done that. Maybe I'll pause there because I don't want to get too more details. But we have one committee doing that work, and then we have the review committee the traditional high school committee doing that work. Our intent moving forward is to collapse those two committees into one. That's the intent. We need to do that. Mrs. Penn and I have been having some conversations about what that might look like, including if we do that, then saying, here's our list of things that have been vetted through the new law and the new process, and anything else needs to go back through the review committee, even if it was previously approved by this board, by a board, because it hasn't met the threshold, and all those, it takes time and effort to go through that. And frankly, some of the books that are on there are from teachers who aren't here anymore, and those books aren't used. And so the effort to go through all of those with the lens of the new law and context would take an extreme amount of time. We're not ready to bring forward the exact plan of what that looks like, but that's the intent. So if I messed up any of those details, Mrs. Penn, please clarify or add any additional details.
President Pratt, Mr. Cruz, members of the board, the only piece that I would probably clarify is that during first semester, we were able to get books that had gone through the working group committee that had previously been board approved. We were able to get those in front of the board at study sessions. In second semester, we're a little bit backed up in taking those in front of the board. And we did that at study session just to make sure everyone was informed.
That's right.
Thank you.
And these books, to be clear, have gone through the traditional process, the more historical process.
Okay, thank you.
President Pratt, Mr. Cruz, members of the board, the books tonight have not been board approved previously.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification, Mr. King.
So who comprises the readers on the site council? Is that parents? Is that staff? Is that administration? Is it one of each? Who comprises that reader review piece there?
Mr. Cruz?
I'm going to say what I think I know is true, and then Mrs. Penn will clarify if I misstated. There aren't readers assigned at the site council level. That's not a requirement that they're assigned. They're given the material in the full information that is brought forth as part of this background and others to review at that time. We do collect their feedback though, and if there's concerns, we note them or we don't bring it further. Is that Ms. Penn?
President Pratt, Mr. Cruz, members of the board, that is correct. One of the things that has shifted over the last few years is that just as there is more time with the board to review, there has been given more time to site council to review. It's not, that is handled at the site level and something that the principal works with the site council. So that's not something that I have instructed or kind of take charge of. It's a site held.
It's certainly something that we can consider is that, requiring volunteers to do something is a little bit challenging, but we could certainly consider getting a representative from or a parent representative from site councils and see if there's somebody that'd be willing to read them and have a better understanding.
So Ruth, just to clarify, I thought when we studied this at our last meeting that there were a few books that didn't come forward because of concerns shared from site councils. Is that correct, Mr. Ruth?
President Pratt, Mr. Cruz, members of the board, there were concerns shared. What the parents on the site council said was that they personally did not have objection to the books, but they thought that some parents, with the idea of parent choosing to opt in or out, they could see that some parents may choose to opt out or may have concerns, but that they personally did not have concerns.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Mr. King.
Yeah, I'd like to also kind of provide a little bit of clarification too. Having read all the books, with the exception of the one that we haven't been presented. I personally have no problem with them. I'm looking at it from the perspective of the parent right? Of a minor child saying, hey, this could be an issue. So, with that, those will be the two books that I won't be able to vote to approve out, for use as curriculum. I'm not saying I don't want them in a library. I'm not saying I want them banned, because that is the furthest thing, because I believe that literature is absolutely the best way to, teach people. But for use as curriculum, because of that context, those would be the two that I can't vote to approve.
Thank you. Mr. Bitten.
Going back to Mr. Custer's point regarding feedback on opt-outs, I would like to go as far as to say I'd like to see that. I think that would be really helpful information, as well as tracking opt-outs for any particular book. And understanding that we have parents who are in a lot of different places, and probably a parent out there who would opt out of every single book that is out there. And so, I mean, I think that'd just be good information as we move forward. And I feel like that these are books that I would let my children read, even as a young high schooler. Yes.
And I think as Mr. Bester had mentioned that, I thought, what a great idea. I just hope that we would communicate it in a way to say, you can opt out. Where our feedback that we're asking you, what objections do you have, things like that. It isn't whether or not you're going to be able to opt out. You know what I mean? Just that parents, you can opt out, approved, that's done, but please share with us your feedback. We'd like to know, to be able to calibrate, to know what is acceptable to parents. So just wording it in a way that they know it's not, it's not a requirement. So, Mr. King, did you have a comment about that?
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is an opt-in, with all the books are now opt-in versus an opt-out. So if they decide not to opt in, that would be the feedback. So that would be the clarification. So,
Yes.
Mr. Bester.
And maybe a special request, only to get kind of ahead of the game in regards to the book. We have always lived in a castle. Will we get notified of that so we can come by and pick it up as soon as possible?
Mr. Kruth.
Mrs. Penn.
President Pratt, Mr. Kruth, members of the board, yes. As soon as I hear that it's in, I can send an email to everyone.
text message.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I have a question about the opt-out. So if a parent decides that they don't feel comfortable with a book, can you clarify, does that opt-out look like, okay, we're doing this unit for the next 3 weeks. So now Sally is going to be in the library. Instead of coming to class, she's going to be in the library for 3 weeks. Or is it, on certain topics, or as we're discussing certain things, and Sally will go to the library? I'm just wondering what that opt-out looks like.
Mrs. Penn.
President Pratt, Mr. Kruth, members of the board, we have had just a few of the opt-out experiences, and those have not been kind of regulated across sites. So our teachers have been working with the parents kind of individually to decide what is the best way to handle that situation. There is one parent that didn't even want their child to have access to the text, and it was on Schoology. So we worked to make it so that that link to that text wouldn't show on the child's Schoology page, but it's been kind of an individual student by student decision up to this point.
Great. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. I also am noting that Little Fires Everywhere is only for grades 11 and 12, correct?
Yes.
And I'm assuming, can you just talk about how teachers gain access to this list, to the approved list, and how they know which books are for certain grades? I don't know if it's a Google Doc or how it's communicated, Mr. Pruitt.
Mrs. Penn.
President Pratt, Mr. Kruth, members of the board, after the board takes action on this list, we do two specific things with it. We send it to our principals, and then they disseminate it to their team lead and to their teachers. We also then have On the curriculum webpage of the Vail School District webpage is a link that has all of the approved books. And so we will update that list and add these books on that spot too.
Perfect. That was actually my next question, is to say, would we consider just putting it on the website for parents to see? So thank you for that. I think that's also an opportunity for parents to be able to look at the list ahead of time if they'd like more time. You know, obviously there's a lot of books on the list, so they may not want to or choose to or be able to read every single one, but they can look at them to be able to say, okay, if this one comes up on my kid's syllabus, I know I'm going to be, you know, watching out for that or concerned or whatever. So thank you for that. Any other comments or questions? I think this is such a important part of our jobs and a tricky one. I think all of us have been very thoughtful about our role on the board as we consider this. I know that some parents, like you said, there's going to be some parents who are going to say no thank you to every book. There's going to be some parents who are upset because we're not bringing forward some books. I think the way that I think about this, I know I've shared it with Mr. Kruth, that you know, I feel like our job is to stay in the middle. And if you're a parent who is a little more conservative or wanting to have more control over the information, then I shouldn't say it that way. Parents can have the opportunity to opt out, and there may be parents who decide that. And then there's going to be some parents who decide, you know, that they need to introduce some literature to their children as well. So it's a tricky balance, and I think one that we're always trying to find what the answer is. So thank you so much for all the time that you've spent on this. I know it's a significant investment of time, so thank you. If there's no other, oh yes, Mr. King.
Real quick, because of those two books and withdrawing those, how do we actually do that vote?
So right now, there is a recommendation and a motion on the table to approve the literature set that's been presented. So we would vote on that unless Mr. Kruth has another recommendation.
That's the motion. I mean, that's the recommendation that I have. The recommendation is to bring forward the list minus the, no, I just closed my
Always
list.
lived in the castle.
Thank you. Minus that one. If I understand what you're saying is you want to be able to show support for the others as well as.
Right. The other six minus, we've always lived in the castle, except for Weaver Liars and Little Fires Everywhere. Unless it's like, would be like a division term.
Okay with it, I think maybe just making that statement, Mr. King, and then taking a vote with your conscience on which your position is, I think might be the best way to go with the motion that's on, with the recommendation that's on the floor.
Is that how that would be reflected in the record then?
Yes, it'll be reflected in the minutes that way.
Okay.
It's different than, for example, the consent agenda because it's one agenda item. So anyway, it's a little different. So then if there's no other comments or questions, if everyone's comfortable, I'll move forward with calling for the vote on the motion on the table. With the I'll just, repeat the recommendation that the Vail School District Governing Board approve the high school literature set revised list as presented.
With the exception of
We've always lived in the castle.
we've always lived in the castle.
Oh, we are doing that?
We are pulling that off. So we're bringing that back next time.
That was the motion.
Yeah, that was the
Yes.
motion that was on.
Okay,
Yes, Mrs. Penn made that. motion.
okay.
Yeah.
With a castle. I'm sorry. I thought you were meaning, okay, yes, I'm so sorry.
So because
I am-
there wasn't time to read that.
Yes,
book. Yeah.
yes. I thought it was the two that Mr. King, okay.
Can you
I
read
am
back the
following.
motion? Mrs.
Sorry.
Penn? Sorry.
We're gonna make this as hard as
That's
possible.
Yes, it's on one of these papers. Administration recommends that the Vail School District Governing Board approve the high school literature set with the exception of We Have Always Lived in the Castle as presented.
Thank you. And we did have a motion and a second.
As presented.
Yes, thank you. So now I will call for the vote. I'm so sorry to make this so complicated. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Please signify by saying aye.
It's an I with a caveat. The I is for the 6 that are there. The nay is for we are little fires everywhere and we were liars.
Okay, thank you. And so.
This is-
So if you're comfortable, I think that the record for your vote would say no.
So then it would be,
But it would be on the record
Yes.
of your comments.
We-
Are you
so
okay with
it-
that?
So it would be a nay on the, with Mrs. Peterson can note in there that you're supportive of the others. And your no vote is specific to those.
specific to those 2 books.
Yes.
Perfect, okay. So in that case, the motion carries. Thank you. Our last agenda item is our new business, our FY 2023-24 proposed budget, also an action item. Mr. Cruz?
This is an item that we have been studying for literally months. Mrs. Kudos is here and can provide additional detail if you want that as well. It's well outlined in the background material as to how we arrived at this and the reasons. Our enrollment did some additional state aid and the passage of the state budget have allowed us to foresee a budget increase. And we have the board has already approved raises and increases across the board for our staff, and is a 4% ongoing raise, and that was on top of a 3% raise that was given out mid-year this year. The purpose of this particular agenda item is to propose a budget for publication, and then at our meeting on July 11th, this budget would then be brought forward for adoption. So with that, I'll make the recommendation the Vail School District Governing Board approve the 2023-2024 proposed budget for publication as presented, and set the public hearing for adoption on July 11th, 2023 at 7 p.m. at the Calvin Baker Leadership Center, 13801 East Benson Highway, Vail, Arizona 85641.
Thank you. Do I have a motion?
You have a motion to approve as presented.
Second.
Mr. Buster and Mr. King. Any comments or questions? Mr. Buster?
I know firsthand this was a huge monumental effort from staff to administration to the board, the time and the caring compassion that went into making sure we take care of our educators, but provide a solid, balanced budget to take care of all of our constituents was just really absolutely phenomenal. So huge thanks to everybody for all the work making this go forward and doing the most responsible thing for all stakeholders. Well done.
Thank you, Mr. Buster. Very well said. Other comments or questions? Mr. Tippett?
I have always appreciated our really deliberate and long process for forming our budget. It feels, when we get to the end, it feels really solid, and I'm really comfortable with what is presented. I understand it very well. I mean, in years past, I've not always liked the numbers, but I understood why they were what they were. So I appreciate that, and we're on really solid ground for future years. Well done.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Tippett. Any other comments or questions? I think it's been stated very well. I just want to thank you so much for your time, Ms. Kyrdos. I know it's been a huge investment, as it is every year, to help make sure that we are understanding every part of the process. So thank you. So if there's no other comments or questions, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Not seeing any. The motion carries. Thank you. Our very last agenda item is adjournment. So I will accept a motion to adjourn tonight at 7:50.
Seconded.
Mr. King, Mr. Buster. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Not seeing any. The motion carries. Thank you.